Welcome to the Lita Citroen Podcast, your space to grow your influence and elevate your personal brand. In each episode, you'll hear inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical strategies to help you stand out, lift up others, and leave your mark on your team, your community, or the world. If you're ready to make your voice heard, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Hello, my friends. We are back together for the Lita Citroen podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we've got a special program because I'm going to share parts of a conversation I had with a colleague, a client, and actually now a good friend, Whitney Hake. And in this conversation, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about being a woman in business. We talk about executive presence and how the old models of executive presence have changed. If you work in an organization, whether it's male dominated, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, we're seeing that things have changed, right? Maybe it's because we all went through COVID. Maybe it's because really strong leaders and organizations have started to listen to voices and see the influence that people who otherwise might not have been heard are offering. But things have changed. And if you know me and you follow the work that I do, I'm a huge advocate of helping these old rules move to the side, right? For some of you, they're very comfortable, and I understand that. But we need to move them aside for those of us who don't fit the model of what executive presence in the old way taught us, right? And the pillars being you have to look a certain way, you have to sound a certain way, and you have to have gravitas, which is this thing that people say is important. We know it when we see it, but we can't teach it, which I don't think is fair. And it's not inclusive of different backgrounds and different groups and communities and voices which haven't been heard. So Whitney and I are going to talk a lot about that. At the time of the conversation, Whitney was the senior vice president of a large commercial real estate firm called Transwestern here in Colorado. And now she has successfully transitioned into a senior managing director role at another very large commercial real estate firm here in Colorado named Newmark. And I've known Whitney for, I want to say almost 10 years. She's smart and confident and curious and all the things I think a lot of us aspire to be. And she's mid-stage in her career, which I find really interesting. So the other thing I want to mention as we get into the conversation is if you're listening to this recording in August of 2025, when I'm recording it, it's actually also the anniversary of my book, The New Rules of Influence, which came out a year ago in 2024. And I have to say, I am so humbled and thrilled with the response this book has gotten. I hear from you all over the world and places I didn't even know the book could get to, whether it's electronic or the audio book or the print book. And you're telling me how the conversational style behind this new model of executive presence, the relatability of the stories and examples, and just the confidence that it gives you and the clarity to know why you want to have influence, who you'll influence, and then where and how you'll build influence. I love hearing your stories. So I'd love to hear your feedback on this podcast, but also if you've had a chance to read The New Rules of Influence, I'd love to hear your stories on that as well. Without further ado, let's tune in to my conversation with Whitney Hake, Senior Managing Director at Newmark in Denver. How do you walk into a situation, or how do you contribute an idea, or maybe you're not feeling 100% confident? How do you navigate those situations? Maybe a client is needing something, or your team is looking to you for guidance, and you're just not feeling 100%. What are some things you do to push through that?
Yeah, in those cases, I like to lean on experience. And I also lean on current events. I know that might sound funny, but being well read, in my experience, is a secret to executive presence. And you can always, there's something that you're sharing in common, right, with business people is current events of the day, of the week, trends, and how to parlay those into conversations. So if I'm not feeling 100% confident in what I have to contribute, then I will turn to current events, because I feel like that is a really good way of telling folks that you're connected to what's happening in the business economy, as well as just globally or in your city. What I do is really important locally. So being tied into what's happening with businesses, the headlines, sometimes that will bridge the gap for me between how I'm feeling and if I have to be there anyway. But to experience. So making sure that you're constantly upskilling when those opportunities present themselves. That's really important to executive presence, because if you're not feeling 100%, you know that you've put in the work, and that's going to see you through to a better time.
Well, and I know that, kind of building on that, one of the things that women sometimes walk into, and you're in a very male dominated industry, I think it's getting better, but it's traditionally real estate and then commercial real estate, is the idea that we're going to be emotional, right? That it's always going to be an emotional solution, an emotional objection, an emotional idea. So what I'm hearing you say is having a broader perspective, being able to pull in data, right? Sort of takes care of the functional side of what we need to know, the analytical thinkers in the room who are going to say, okay, this isn't just a wild idea she's presenting. There's actually something to back it up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yeah. There's just a lot that can be putting those data into my conversations was a learned behavior for me. And there's what you're naturally inclined to do, and then there's those learned behaviors, and then there's finding that authenticity in between.
So you mentioned one of my favorite words, which is authenticity. So knowing that you're going to bring this data or this empirical information combined with your own experience, because gravitas has a lot to do with being able to be credible, right? Being a subject matter expert. How do you then inject vulnerability, authenticity into the conversation to navigate those tough conversations and situations?
I think there's a lot that I've learned about empathy since leading a team, and not everyone is going to feel 100% any given day. And so if you're empathetic to the client, empathetic to a colleague, and trying to meet them where they're at, that's where that authenticity and vulnerability is at. But establishing credibility while being empathetic, that's a funny dance.
What are some other ways that you've built your presence? You happen to be very stylish. You present a very polished, professional appearance. What about your body language or any other areas of your presence and leadership that maybe you've consciously worked on?
Yeah, I think making certain that physically I feel my best every single day is very important to me and sets the tone for my team. But outside of that, I've really worked on my speech. My generation is very privy to vocal fray, thanks to the Kardashians. And I try to watch the news and look at how the newscasters are speaking in elevators. So they go up and then they go down, so that their sentences don't end as questions. And that is something actually that Lita has helped me with in the past. But I also think too, just establishing comfortability in what you're bringing to the table. That's where all of the confidence comes from. And if you're confident in what you're talking about, if you know that there's friends in the room, lean on them as heavily as possible. You want everyone to walk away from an interaction thinking, wow, she really knew her stuff, and also made me feel good about our interaction and our future possibility of doing business together. So there's the physical presentation, but there's also backing it up with all of the pre-work and the experience and making that shine past your age or your sex or any knocks against you per se.
And that's unfortunate that age can be a knock against you, as you say, on either end, right?
Totally, both.
One of the things you and I talked about as we were sort of thinking through how we would have this conversation is how you approach, let's say, a critical meeting where you're going to make sure you have something of value to contribute. Can you walk us through a little bit how you frame that up, how you think about what you're going to offer? Maybe you're not running the meeting, but you want to make sure your voice is heard.
Yeah, I think doing the pre-work for that meeting is very important. But in the meeting itself, don't zone out. There's no good that comes from zoning out at all whatsoever. But listen critically to what's happening in the meeting, and then find your spot, find your opening. And I know that can seem daunting, and I know that can seem hard, but there's always a natural lull in every conversation. Being comfortable with the lull is one thing, and that's actually a huge negotiating tactic that I use on a daily basis. But two, making certain that you have an additive contribution. And so the worst thing, in my opinion, is just repeating something that somebody has already said. That's really frustrating. But if you're engaged in the dialogue and you're thinking critically throughout that meeting, something is going to pop into your mind that that's pivotal to the conversation, and it's on you. You've already taken the seat at the table, so you need to use your voice. And I'm such a huge proponent of, whenever we walk into a presentation, whomever is in that presentation on behalf of my team has done the pre-work. Sometimes we meet as a team. We do mock-ups where we're talking through who's going to cover what aspect of a presentation. And I put the onus on myself as leader of the team to always be stretching my boundaries. So I encourage the young people that work with me or my colleagues, if they've heard me say something that's market related, steal it from me, because it's on me to be on my game, to think of something new in those moments. And I would rather them look good and be parroting something that I've said before that now they fully understand. And that forces me to get outside of my comfort zone and say something that's new to the particular situation we're in.
So what I'm hearing you saying is, before you even go into the meeting, do your pre-work, have some ideas of what you could contribute, pay attention to the meeting, don't zone out. I love that. I think that's really hard to do when we spend so much of our time behind computers now. And then look for those openings, those natural openings to offer your idea or your thought or suggestion, and not just say, yeah, I was thinking that too. Or I love when somebody says, well, to echo what Whitney just said. It's like, well, we all just heard it. We don't need you to echo. But it's different to say, to build on what Whitney just said. And I recently did an article, I think, and the fabulous Sabrina, I think we'll find it and put it in the comments, about, when do you speak up? Because so often we have that great idea and then we wait and somebody else offers it. And it's like, oh, I wanted to share that. They get credit for the idea. And our fear is sometimes that, well, if it's not a good idea, we're going to be, the slings and arrows, but the other person gets credit for it. You mentioned something I want to build on, and that's this idea of a lull in the conversation. How can we use silence strategically, even when we're presenting our own ideas?
Silence is a moment of impact.
Tell us about that. Is there an example of, maybe, because I know I love to use silence. It draws people in. It makes them pay attention. Like, did they just ask me a question? But it is that moment of impact. Do you have an example, or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think silence for me is most effective in negotiations. So I represent building owners, and tenants are represented by other brokers, and we have to assemble a transaction that works for both parties. And silence is where I'm not overplaying my hand, because especially in today's economic environment, there's this give, give, give that landlords are bringing to the table. And at some point in time, I can't give anymore. I shouldn't give anymore, or there's nothing left. And I never want to make it to that point in any negotiation. So I use silence strategically if I've presented an offer, or I've presented a new, I guess, component to the deal that should create value for the other side. You just stop right there. Don't keep going, because one, it's going to detract from what you've just offered. And two, it'll make you seem unsure, and they're going to catch on to you have more to give and ask for more again. So there's the trick of silence in any negotiation. And I have to also sell a lot of terms to my clients, right? And they need to believe that I know where the market's at, and I know that we're presenting a market transaction. So if I start second guessing myself, they're going to say, well, wait a second, could our rate be higher? Or could we get away with providing less tenant improvement dollars? And we want to deliver something that's competitive, and that silence establishes credibility as well.
I love that, because I think what our natural tendency is to keep talking. And you said, overplaying your hand. We can call it overselling. Even if you're not in a negotiation, just having a conversation. When somebody asks a question and then doesn't pause to give the person a chance to answer, and I think we do this mostly out of nervousness, or that sense that silence is somehow dangerous. But I love to ask a question and then look at the camera if I'm doing a webinar or having a client meeting, and just show that I can sit here as long as it takes until somebody answers, because somebody will, right? Somebody will participate because they're feeling as awkward with the silence as I am, but I have introduced the silence. So I feel a little bit more control, and it's not to manipulate, but it's to drive home a point. So I know as speakers, we have to always make sure we use silence to drive home a message, and not just artificially insert pauses that are going to possibly let the audience lose track of what we're saying. So I love that you're talking about that. One other thing I want to just build on is your idea of a team, because you mentioned that you set the stage for your team, and balancing the confidence, the gravitas and credibility with you're a real person. You juggle a lot of different priorities in your life, and your industry right now is a little tough. So how do you bring all of that authenticity, vulnerability, as well as the gravitas and confidence into your work with your team?
Yeah, I think there's a glass half full mentality that you have to have. There's positivity that is infused into each day, whether artificial or authentic, but it keeps us going, right? And being a team leader is a choice that I've made, and it's not a natural behavior for me, but it's been so rewarding to watch the people that I've coached over the years succeed with me, or succeed in their own career paths, independent of my influence. And that lights me up. So as much as I don't like expense reports and approving silly day-to-day stuff, there's so much satisfaction and the power of a team that's positive instead of a team that's negative and just kind of imploding on itself, especially when times get challenging and tough, is the tone to set every single day. And I find that it starts with the top. And for my team, that's myself. And there's a lot of positive trickle down effects from that. But I certainly, if my glass isn't half full, that affects the team on a daily basis too. So watching that growth and success through others has really brought a new dimension to my career. And I noticed myself honestly doubling down on making them successful. So ultimately things work towards the top. And if they're successful, I'm successful, but I don't want to stop because I want to see them succeed as well. So there's this buy-in nature that we're all sharing. The market is what it is. So we're all sharing in that too. That's where that empathy comes back around. I don't think pre-COVID, we had many empathetic conversations internally or externally. I was not known for those. But I do think that is part of the dialogue now. And when I started a family of my own, that was like when I had a kid, a lot of empathy just came bleeding out of my eyeballs somehow. But it's part of the business climate today and part of leading a team that I'm actively learning about more and more. But positivity, all the positivity.
Well, sometimes that's hard to get, right?
Yeah.
I think of you as a business owner, and you and I've talked
Mhm.
about that. You think like an entrepreneur because you've built this team within Transwestern. I'm a business owner in that it is my company and I built it. But even if you're not the owner or the principal, we all surround ourselves with teams, and there are days when positivity is really hard to find, and you don't feel it. You're in a grouchy mood. Maybe you just lost something you were really looking forward to, a proposal or a client or an engagement. And I think being able to share that with your team, how it feels, how it impacts you. I get it that they're looking at you and saying, if mom's okay, if the boss is okay, then we're going to be okay. But bringing them into the realness of those experiences, I think also helps them grow as leaders.
Yep.
Because they see that it's not all roses and sunshine, right? There are days that, you just want to go watch Oprah at 3:00 in the afternoon and, get a bag of bonbons. And I'm not saying I've done that, but let's just pretend. And being real and being vulnerable and saying, I know we're going to get through this, but here's the situation and here's what I need from you. And here's, now is your time to tell me what you need from me. Creating that dialogue is really important. And I know you've had those conversations with your team.
Absolutely. I also think that's where the current events come in and are very helpful because it's factual and encouraging others to participate in reading the news, however they read the news, is really important because when the big failures started to happen earlier this year, I had team members that had no idea what that meant. And it became a discovery process that we went through together as a team. Instead of just saying top down, this is what's happening.
Right.
Let's learn more together in these moments.
Well, and something I kind of mentioned at the beginning that you're touching on is embracing their individuality, right? We all work in spaces that are diverse, and being inclusive and celebrating the differences instead of always trying to direct and trying to build coercion. It's more about leadership and building collaboration. And I love that even though you are the boss, you're using team a lot, which I try to emulate as well. So I appreciate that.
Your voice matters. My new book, The New Rules of Influence, shows you how to build long-lasting impact with authenticity, no tie or title required. Get your copy of the book today and start owning your voice.
Is there anything you think has really been instrumental to your career that you'd like the audience to know about?
Always be leveling up. It does not matter where you're at in your career. Find someone inside of your industry, outside of your industry, the same sex as you are, a different sex. It doesn't matter. Find someone that you can point to and say, holy cow, they've made it. They know what they're doing. And that's always going to change over time. The mentors that I've held in that high regard, you can meet them in those moments. They might become friends, or you can get to know their business practices and take tiny pieces of what works well for them that you would like to emulate. I'm such a big proponent of what comes next and finding the people, finding the situations, trying to think through that uncomfortability, like you were talking about, Lita, where your last corporate job wasn't jiving with your authentic self. So if that's happening, what do you do about it? In my case, I turned to executive coaching, and that relationship between you and I has evolved over time. Mentors, sponsors, there are business people that are successful that believe in paying it forward. I'm certainly one of those now, and I'm very proud to be in a position to do so. But there's a million people that have helped me along the way establish that confidence. And it really started with me reaching out to them and leveling up in relationships and situations and strategy, and always have an eye towards that, because it's going to pull your executive presence into another stratosphere.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that.
When was the last time your keynote speaker drove more action than just excitement? Today, it's not just enough to energize the audience. We need to show them how to use the skills we're teaching. If you're looking for a speaker who will drive your business goals, let's talk. Check out lita360.com for more information.
So based on the conversation you just heard, the first action item is decide what you will contribute. Whitney gave us some great ideas about, being well read, listening to current events, being conscious of your upskilling. Bring that information with you into critical meetings. Don't just expect you're going to think of it off the top of your head. Have 3 or 4 ideas next time you go into a meeting and look for those opportunities to introduce those. The second one, which kind of builds on that, is take a risk. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Sometimes that's where we do our best learning. Make sure you're taking risks that are still aligned with your values, that you're still staying true to yourself. That job that I took, where I knew I wasn't like them, I was different, I was the outsider, that was a risk for me. And while it didn't pay off in the job, it taught me a lot about authenticity. So look for those opportunities. Before you just say no, ask yourself, is this a chance for me to learn something, to upskill? Number 3, embrace silence. It's okay. Remember, our mothers taught us silence is golden. And that didn't just mean to be quiet. It meant we have to sometimes embrace the silence in conversation. Our message can be more impactful. It can become stronger. It can be more intentional if we let the message sit for a moment. Number 4, share your vulnerabilities. I know that in terms of even social media, and this has been a hard one for me, I've shared some posts that are really personal. And yes, I'll preface it by saying sometimes this is a personal post, but I've shared some posts that were really personal. And the feedback I get from those is unbelievable. So many of you are saying, thank you for letting us get to know you. Thank you for showing us that what you experience is what we experience. People want to know that you're like them. And if you're always stoic, if you're always uber confident, that isn't relatable. So pick and choose your time, right? We can't be vulnerable all the time, but find those moments where you can be vulnerable. You can let someone see behind the curtain, so to speak, and know who you are as a person, know who you are as a leader, know what your dreams are, what scares you, what gives you pause. Let that shine through. And number 5, as Whitney said many times, keep learning, right? We've always got to be learning. If it's reading, whether it's watching documentaries about topics that you can weave into conversations, whether it's news about your industry and trends that are coming on, be paying attention. You don't want to overdo that. I've worked with people in the past and every other word out of their mouth was a quote from a book or an example from a book. And it's like, okay, I haven't read all those books. What is your thought on it? Make sure you're always injecting your own thoughts, but it can give you that data that Whitney talked about that you can walk into a conversation and say, okay, this part's my opinion, but here's what it's based on. right? I've read all of this. I've studied these case studies. I've looked at the history. This is my opinion formed on that, not just based on, I don't know, top of mind. So those are some 5 action items you can start doing right now.
Well, how fun was that? Whitney is so full of confidence in her stories and her examples and the actionable tips that she gave us. I really appreciate that you stayed till the end and heard the entire program. I look forward to coming back and bringing another podcast for you very soon. Please don't forget to like and follow and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to this message. And until we're back together again, I wish you health and happiness and all good things.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lida Citroën podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show and leave a review. It helps more people discover these inspiring conversations. For more tools, insights, and resources, visit Lida360.com or connect with Lida on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, your influence has the power to make a real difference.